So do you think that the 3% increase is fair, given that the public office bearers already earn a significant salary compared to many others who work in public institutions across the country?
You know, this comes to the very heart of the challenge that South Africa faces in terms of inequality between those who have jobs that are in managerial positions and those who are in the working class. And what one notices, for example, is that this 3% pay increase for higher level managers in the public service is being severely criticized by the trade union movements, who themselves secured a 7.5% salary increase for the coming year. Part of this arises from the fact that they feel that the public servants in in managerial positions and in public office have had annual increases, whereas the working class endured no increase whatsoever in the 2021-22 year. So there is a feeling that has been growing, a resentment by the working class of the higher salaries that are being earned by the managerial class. And I would submit that even in the private sector, this is probably also a valid criticism in terms of the huge inequality in the level of pay between workers and those in command. The situation is exacerbated by perceptions that public servants have been failing in their duty, as reflected by the lack of service delivery through much of the country. There is a growing resentment, in particular, of politicians and of appointees through the cadre deployment system of the government itself. And so there is a resentment at the fact that people are being put into public positions of authority who are incapable and incompetent to actually carry the functions associated with the position that they've been appointed to, and yet are earning these elevated salaries.
And that is of great concern, Doc. And of course, another component to this is the impact that this will have on an already inflated public wage bill. The fiscus already under immense pressure, with fears around revenue collection and other concerns when it comes to how government will be funding different projects or institutions in its financial year. Will there be any real impact, just based on your assessment of the salary scales that we're talking about here, and of course that 3% that they will be getting?
On the face of it, of course, there would be a real impact. Although, if you look at the budgeted increase in public service remuneration, 3% is not way above what was originally budgeted for. But then you've got to take into account the 7.5% increase that was budgeted for the ordinary public servants who are not in elevated managerial positions. Much depends. One cannot actually draw a firm conclusion without knowing what happens to the head count of the number of public servants, because in theory the government is able to control its overall budget by reducing the number of people that it employs, not necessarily by firing them, but simply by not replacing those who leave through attrition. And the second point to make in this regard is that many of the public servants themselves are in a position where they would rather leave the public service and take pension and so on. And in that regard, and if they are not replaced, that can actually avoid the government from, prevent the government from overshooting its budget. Thirdly, the government itself continues, or Treasury continues, emphasizing that it is at pains to reallocate its expenditures in such a way as, in other words, it has to take away from somewhere in order to fund the extra remuneration of those public servants. And if it does so in an effective way, then of course the budget doesn't have to be overrun. But on the face of it, yes, it does send a negative message.
Thank you very much for that update, Dr. Azar Jammine, joining us this evening to unpack that 3% that public office bearers have received, signed off by President Cyril Ramaphosa. He's, of course, the Director and Chief Economist at Econometrix, joining us this evening.